Very good. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. We are now continuing our learning in the Sefer, the book, which is called Likuti Torah. In Likuti Torah, this is a compilation of speeches. There were just a fraction of the speeches which were given by the first Rebbe of Chabad. And I don't know if you can really call them speeches as such, because they really are sort of revelations of the soul. And the purpose of it, of course, is to identify Judaism, what Judaism really is, and what we're supposed to do, and how it's a dynamic, you want to call it a religion, a dynamic religion, to fill the world with reality, to fill the world with the realization that God is creating us, and that He loves us, and is close to us, and cares about us. And we're being created brand new every instant, and every instant we have a new responsibility. And the Jewish people especially. So what is the job of the Jewish people? So this week, we're learning in the Torah portion. The Torah was given to the Jewish people to tell them who they are and what to do and how to do it. So let's start from the end. How to do it is with love and with fear and with faith. What are we supposed to do? The Torah and the commandments in the world in order to fix up the world. Who are we? We're chosen by God to do this. Every Jew, whether he knows it or doesn't know it, every Jew individually, not just the whole Jewish people in general, and those that adhere to, keep the faith, but every single Jew is every single instant an emissary to God, to be a teacher and an example and a priest to the world. Mamlechet Kohanim, we're a nation of priests to bring blessing to the world and to tell the non-Jews how much God loves them, He's creating them, and how important they are. Okay, in order to do this, one very essential step in doing this was having the Jews in Egypt, taking them out of Egypt, giving them the Torah, and bringing them to the land of Israel, traveling through the desert for 40 years and bringing them to the land of Israel. Okay, so here we are. The Jewish people just got out of Egypt about a year earlier. Well, let me close this window here. 1 minute. Let me get this here. I just wanted to write something down. So the Jews got out of Egypt, and about a year later, they started. They received the Torah. They received the Torah 50 days later, but they sinned with the golden calf, so they schlepped the whole thing out another couple of months until they got the second tablets. And then they continued camping there, and then they built the tabernacle. And then they started moving. And a little bit more than a year and a couple of weeks after they received the Torah, Moses sent out these spies to take out to survey the land of Israel in order to conquer it. And the spies came back 40 days later on Tisha B'Av and said, we can't go in, can't do it. And the Jewish people said, oh, okay, we're not going to go in. And Moses and God got really angry. What are you talking about? The whole reason you got out of Egypt and got the Torah was in order to go to the land of Israel. And they said, yeah, we're not saying we're never going to go in. We're just not going to go in now. We don't want to go in now. We'll think about it. And really their intention was not to go in at all. That was really their intention. Why? Because they wanted to stay in the desert. We'll learn about this. They wanted to stay in the desert where they were protected by clouds, and they got free water and free bread, and they were all together, and they didn't have any problems. They didn't have to fight any battles or plow or plant and do all these other things. No frustrations, right? Sometimes you can plow and plant and work and your crops don't grow. Here, there's no problem. There's no crops. There's no nothing. They're just eating manna from heaven. Maybe it's a little bit boring, but it's better than fighting giants. That's for sure. In any case, so the Jews, they decided they're going to stand in the land in the desert and not go into Israel. And so God got very angry at them. So he said, okay, you don't want to go in the land of Israel, you're not going to go. 40 years you'll wander around in the desert until this whole entire generation that refused to enter will all die. And meanwhile, there'll be new people that'll be born, and also all those that were under the age of 20 when they refused to go in, they'll also still remain alive. And then you go in the land of Israel. Okay, then 40 years later, let's fast forward 40 years later, 39 years later, Joshua did the same thing as Moses, but he didn't send 12, he sent two. We're learning about that in the Devar Malchut. He sent two spies, and the spies, they didn't go into the land of Israel for 40 days. They were just there for a very short amount of time. And they didn't even go very far into the land of Israel. They just got like to the outside border of Israel, and then they ran away. They ran away. They had to run because they were being pursued. So that was, but the spies that Joshua sent, the two spies, they succeeded. They succeeded, and Moses did not succeed. Okay, so the 12 spies that Moses sent did not succeed. Even though the Rebbe, we're going to learn again that the Rebbe said that really the 12 spies of Moses, to a certain degree, they did succeed. They were the first Jews as part of the Jewish people to go into the land of Israel. the part of the Jewish people, they were the first ones, the Jewish people. There was Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. They lived in Israel, but they weren't part of the Jewish people as such. They were individuals. But not only that, they came back, these 12 spies of Moses came back with a good report. So it let everybody know that the land of Israel is a good place. And the actual conquering only came 40 years later. Good. But what does this got to do with us? What does it mean to us? Everything that's written in the Torah is not just history. Not just history. It certainly is history. It certainly did happen. But that's on the most, how do you say, superficial level of the Torah. The Torah is true. Every aspect of the Torah is true. The Jews really were in Egypt, and they really did get out. And they did receive the Torah, and they did travel in the desert, and they did refuse to go into the land of Israel, and they did finally enter after 40 days. Okay, but all this is teaching us something. Everything in the Torah is inside of us. Everything. That's what Chassidut comes to teach us. The Torah is alive. The Torah is alive. Everything. And if you want to know how to live, so it's only through the Torah. Only the Torah can teach you how to live. To be concerned every moment with life. Okay, so here we go. Ready? Vayishlach Yoshua min Shittim. This is the Haftorah of this week's Torah portion. We read this after we read the Torah. Vayishlach Yoshua. Joshua sent from a place called Shittim, Shnayim Anashim Amraglim, two spies. 1 second. Give me this. I got the wrong thing right here. What's this? No, I didn't. Here we go. Joshua was sent from this place called Shittim, two spies, Cheresh secretly, Lemor, and he said to them, Lechu, go, U'ra'u et ha'oretz, go and see the land and Jericho. Right? It's right in the beginning, a little in the beginning of the book of Joshua. Behold, Yavavare certainly lost Yoshua. Yoshua did not send these scouts or spies midato on his own. Rak, but Shashem Yisborech, that God sivahu alken. God commanded him to do this. Let me make this a little bit bigger. But God commanded him. And the spies that Moses sent is written, Shalach lacha, you send them. Omer Razal, the rabbis say, Ledatcha. God left it up to Moses. God didn't command Moses to send spies. God said to Moses, I'm not telling you no, and I'm not telling you yes. You make the decision. Ani eini mitzavelcha. I'm not commanding you. That's what God said to Moses. But Joshua, it must have been that God commanded him. He wouldn't do it on his own. He wouldn't do it on his own. Okay, let's understand this. Why is it that Joshua was commanded and he sent two and it succeeded. And Moses was not commanded to send in. He sent 12 and it didn't work. Let's understand this. Shebachol Eretz Israel, that in the whole land of Israel, Lo Tziva Hashem Yisbrech, God did not command to send spies. Rak Birecho, only in Jericho. That's what he said. No more. See the land, Jericho. And so Joshua obviously was giving over to the spies that he sent what God told him. God told him, spy out the land of Israel, namely Jericho. Now, Jericho is right on the border of outside of Israel and Israel. It's right on the border. Shahayata Menula, this was like the lock, the, how do you say, the door, Shel Eretz Israel, of the land of Israel. Jericho Sogoret. Jericho was a huge city. It had all sorts of nations that lived there. It was like a big, how do you say, cosmopolitan city, and it had a huge wall around it. And it was like you wanted to conquer Israel, you had to conquer Jericho. If you conquered all of Israel, you didn't conquer Jericho, Israel was still there because it was packed with, it wasn't Israel, it was Canaan. Uboyu, Darim, Mikal, Umos, and there was living all the different nations, like it says, Hachiti, Vahamori, Kol Bala, Jericho, all the people that lived in Jericho. So Jericho was like the cosmopolitan, what do you call it, the hub center of activity and Canaanite identity. Big like Paris or something like that. This was like all of the land of Israel. And the land of Israel was inhabited, this is by 31 kings. And I guess all of them had certain representatives or people, whatever, that lived in Jericho. And that's where Joshua sent his spies, just to the city of Jericho. Well, let's understand this. It's called Jericho in English, but maybe we should call it in English, Jericho. Jericho. Let's understand this. How is this found in us? What's this got to do with me and you? Good, the Torah is very interesting. It's a history book. And this is history like 3,000, whatever it is, 200 something years ago. Almost 3,300 years ago. Over 3,000, whatever it is, 200 years ago, the Jewish people received the Torah 3,336 years ago, and they wandered around the desert for 40 years. So subtract the 40 from 36, so you get like 3,296 years old, something like that. Okay, so that's pretty amazing. You have here a book that has history, accurate, detailed history from way back then. That's pretty interesting. Says the Rebbe. Okay, good. That's right. It's interesting. But the Torah is more than that. The Torah is written by God. It's not just written as a history book that God is like a really, genuine historian, or to tell us that, God was also ruling back then or something. That's also true. But it's coming to tell us something now. This whole story about Jericho, it's inside of us. And it's a cosmopolitan city. And that we have to send spies. What's going on? Okay, so it says, this whole idea, what does it mean to me and you? So it comes out that all the Jewish people, okay, so how is it that all of the Jewish people embody this thing of Jericho? And what is it that we have to have spies? Israel and the whole rest of the land of Israel doesn't require spies. It is written, the Avram Zakin Bobiyomin says that Abraham was old and he was coming in days. Okay, that's it. Now we're finished with the questions. Now let's get to the answer. What's the question? How is this whole story of Joshua sending two spies into only Jericho relevant to us? How is Jericho found inside of us? Who is Joshua? Who are the spies? What are we supposed to do? This is demanding something from us. What? Okay, let's go. Hine Kasiv, it is written, Avram Zaken Baba Yamin. It says that Abraham he was old. This is before he sent out Eliezer to find a match for his son Isaac. But Abraham was old, and it says he was old, and he was Baba Yamim, coming in days. Okay, what does it mean he was coming in days? What does that mean? Pirish v'Zohar, it says in the Zohar, Shenitlabesh b'yamim, that he was clothed in days. He had his garments were days. That the days of his life, they were garments, which are given to the soul. Each one, each person is given a certain amount of life. Right? The soul is eternal. Let's say for our purposes, it's eternal. It's not within time. The soul is like pure life. And the soul is put into the body. And the body is in a place, and it's in a time. It's in a very limited level of consciousness. That the body does not allow us to feel God. It doesn't indicate that it's a creation, that it's being created, the body. And also the consciousness doesn't tell us that we're being created. You have these fantastic genius philosophers that are certain there's no such thing as God. God is totally not necessary for their philosophy. But the soul is certain that there's God. The soul is no doubt about it. Because God is the creator of time, God is the creator of space, and the soul feels this. But when the soul comes into the body, so the soul is under time and space. Why is this? Because time and space are also creations of God, and God is creating them so for the soul, so that the soul will fix them up. Why God wants this, I don't know, but that's what God wants. We're in the world to fix up the world. When the world becomes the way God wants, then the world is infinitely higher than heaven. I know I've said this a lot of times before, but I'll repeat it. If Adam had not sinned with the tree, there would be no such thing as heaven. There would just be eternal life on this physical world. We'd feel the body is more precious than the soul. It's higher, it's holier than the soul if we use the body properly. The same thing with time. Time is infinitely holier and higher than beyond time. In the upper world, it's, so to speak, beyond time, even though there's also a certain sense of time. But let's say for our purposes, the upper worlds are above time. But God creates this thing called time, because if we use it properly, then time reveals a deeper aspect of God than above time. That God is above time, that's God, God, that's his, how do you say, that's God's nature, so to speak, that he's above time, he's not limited. And that we can reveal that God also can limit himself in time, and that for a purpose, this is very high. The first person to get this idea was Abraham. Abraham was the first person to reveal why God creates time and why God creates the world. And Abraham used every instant of his time properly. And we should do the same thing. I mean, if people only, you probably, got the point that people die. People die, everybody dies. Even though up to now we're doing pretty good, we're alive. So maybe we won't die, right? Maybe we won't die. But if you look around and you see that that's misleading, that in fact, everybody dies. And all those people that do die, a lot of them thought they would never die, right? They never die. Like it says, the graveyards are filled with people that thought that the world couldn't exist without them, right? Couldn't exist without them. They died, the world got okay. Because the whole idea of death is a temporary thing. Death is a temporary thing. It was brought about by Adam eating from the tree of whatever knowledge. And if it wouldn't be for Adam, then there wouldn't be all this confusion. Everybody would be like Abraham. They would use every instant of time properly, right? Because time is a good creation. God put us in the world that we should have time. So it says that's the whole thing of creation, right? God created the first day, the second day, the third day, days, all of a sudden these days. Just say God created the world and that's it, right? And the sun is spinning around, whatever it is, the earth is spinning around. And no, there has to be days and time and month and holidays and this, because essentially that's good if we use it properly. So it says that's what Abraham did. Abraham, every day of Abraham's life was a garment. Like it says, Yom Yotzru, days were made. Hainu, Aliyah Day Torah, by me, the Torah and the commandments. God created days in order that we should fill them, use our time properly, our time and our energy and our body with Torah and the commandments. Sha'adam osek be yamav in his days. V'kol yom shebitel, and every day that you do not use for what it was intended for Torah and the commandments. Chaser mi'anasham lavush, the soul is missing a garment. Kafi erech bitulo, according to how much you negated, how many garments you were missing. And that's the whole idea, by the way, of reincarnation. In Judaism, there's reincarnation. There's a whole book written about it. Gilgulim, the Tanya explains it also, that the soul comes down into the world in order to attain these garments. And if a person comes into the world and doesn't know he's Jewish, or knows he's Jewish but doesn't do the commandments, whatever it is, then he just has to come back until he gets the commandments. Sometimes there's some souls, I mean, this is big, complicated business. And don't think I understand it. There's a book called Sefer Gilgulim of the Arizal. It explains this in great length, great depth. But if a person, sometimes it could be that a person comes into the world and he doesn't know he's a Jew and doesn't listen. Some Chabadnik puts on him one time tefillin. It could be that person came into the world just for that, just a one time. Let's say he was a tzaddik and one day he forgot to put on tefillin and he came into the world just that he should put on one more time. I don't know. I mean, however this works out, it works out. Okay, so that days are garments for our soul. Good? Okay. That's pretty interesting. Let's understand why. Levushim, why do you have to have the soul? Why does it have to have garments at all? Shaloti aruma, so the soul will be naked. What's the problem? Begam lama nichtav inyan zeh b'Torah. Why is the Torah even written that Abraham was coming in days and that he had we have to have days, we have to have soul. The soul is naked. What's the problem? Adam, when he was born, he was naked. Huh? He was naked, didn't have any garments. Soul, also, what does it have to have garments? You go up to heaven. So what if you're naked? What, everybody's going to laugh at you in heaven? You haven't got any body, right? You haven't got any body. What's the problem? The Indian is like this. Behold, we say, B'kol yom, every day, nakdisha. Every day we say, we are making God holy. We are making you holy. Nakdishach v'naritzach. We are making you holy. God, we are making you holy. We say this in the repetition of the Shemon Esrei. We say, we are making you holy, God. Nakdishach. Well, at first glance, doesn't make any sense. Lomer Ken. How can we say this about God? God is already holy. Well, we have to make God holy. God exists before the world. God is creating us. We're making God holy. What does it mean that we make God holy? God is already holy. He's holy in himself. All holiness comes from him. How can we say that we make God holy? Also, Lama Omrim, why do we say 3 times holy? Right? And again, the Shemon Esrei, Kadosh, 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 like the angels say, holy, holy, holy. Behold, the Torah was given to us in 3 levels. What are they? 3 things, which are thought, speech, and action. And Shekama mitzvahs, there are many commandments which depend on speech. Saying Shema, blessing after eating. There are some commandments which depend only on thought. Loving God, believing in God, only in thought. You don't do anything, you don't say anything. There are some commandments that they depend on action. You have to put on tefillin. The negative commandments, withhold yourself from doing it. Just doing or not doing. Or at first glance, a person can make a mistake and say that there is no godliness which is revealed in deed. Shava lebechinas gilui elokus, to the level of godliness which is revealed in speech and in thought. Right? The action is anybody can act, right? How do you say Judaism for dummies? What's that? The commandments. The commandments is Judaism for dummies. Put on the tefillin, that's all. You just put them on. Right? Give charity, you give charity. You have to say anything? You don't have to say anything. It's good. You should say a blessing. You should have the proper thoughts. But if a person doesn't say the blessing, a lot of times that happens to me. You get Russian Jews, right? And the Russian Jews, and they're Jewish. They say, yeah, are you Jewish? Yes. Your mother is Jewish? Yes. Okay, make a blessing, right? Baruch, Ata. I even learned how to say in Russian, repeat after me, Paftari Zaminoi. Even if they say after you, they don't know what they're saying. They have no what they're saying. They speak to them in English a little bit. They repeat, Baruch, Baruch, Ata, Adada. They don't know what you're saying. So it's not really a blessing. And all they have to know is that it's a thing from God. They're doing a thing from God. It's a Jewish thing. And they're putting on, it's not doing it for their blood pressure or something. So that's a commandment, is like Judaism for dummies. You don't have to know anything. You just do it. Speech, you have to know a little bit already. I mean, you have to understand what you're saying a little bit. You have to say the words. You have to know how to speak Hebrew. Thought, for sure, to love God. So you might think that there's more godliness revealed in thought about God, loving God, fearing God. And okay, a little bit less revealed in speech, but in action, there's almost no godliness revealed. It's not so godly, right? That's what it says again. Or at first glance, a person can make a mistake and think that there's not so much revealed godliness indeed, like it is in speech and in thought. Shebechin is maisa, that deed who mit aveh is very thick, umit kashem, and it's crass. It's how do you say physical more. Gam bebechin is domim, and gam bebechin is domim. Even when you give something mineral like money or copper or tzedakah, that's such a that's a commandment, but it's a commandment, like I said, for simpletons. It's not like for beginners. You want real godliness to be revealed. That's in thinking about God, right? He says no. The fact of the matter is not so. Because everything is equal by God. Because everything in front of God really is like nothing. It's all equal. The ein hefresh, there's no difference between God, whether the upper worlds, the angels that are screaming and burning up, and they recognize God and they love God, and this, or a simple, like we said, a Russian Jew that he doesn't know anything at all whatsoever, and he puts on tefillin, right? He puts on tefillin. You tell him to do it. He puts it on first time. Never did it before in his life. Has no idea what he's doing. He just knows it's a Jewish thing. A nice rabbi has got a white beard. He asked him to put on tefillin, and he puts it on, right? The fact is that is equal to the angels serving God. Why? Because in front of God, really everything is like nothing anyway. Because God is infinite. There's no comparison. That's what it means. HaKodesh b'shamayim words. That was what it means, that God is holy in the heavens and the earth. Koloma, what does it mean? He's holy in the heavens and the earth. The levels of heaven, the highest level of the highest angels that have this incredible comprehension of God, and they're emotional, they burn up to God. And the level of earth, which is the lowest, let's say a child, whatever, like, or I just said before, right, this simple guy doesn't know anything whatsoever, it's totally equal by him. Because God creates them all, he's totally separate from everything. Even though that God enlivens everything and he creates everything, is the life that he gives is what's called Rotzev Ashov. It's there and it's not there. It's there and it's not there. In other words, the world doesn't really exist on its own. The world has to be created all the time, brand new by God. It's there and it's not there. Constantly, the world. So if so, God creating something from nothing, it doesn't make any difference to God what that something is. If it's a physical something, it's a spiritual something. It all comes from nothing. Okay, what's this got to do with it? Making God holy in the world. This drawing down life from God's holiness, this is done by means of the Jews. Like it says, who is keeping the world alive? The Jews. When the Jews do the commandments, that's what keeps the world alive. Perish, what does it mean? In fact, even the Jews that have the potential to do the commandments is also keeping the world alive. Perish, what does it mean? Even in the physical world, Mamshich and the Jewish people, we can draw down the oneness of God. Okay, Israel, who is like the Jewish people? Goy echad ba'oretz, one nation in the world. So it says a nation of one in the world. We draw down one of God in the world. That even in the earth, we can draw down the oneness of God. And just reveal that there's nothing except for God. God is creating everything. And therefore, Omrim, we say, Gimel Pamim 3 times, holy, holy, holy. Why 3 times? To draw down this awareness of God into these 3 levels: thought, speech, and action. And these are also into the 3 levels of the soul, which is called nefesh, that's the lowest aspect, that's action. Ruach, that's like thought, or speech, I'm sorry, nefesh, that's action. Ruach, that's like speech, emotions. And neshama, that's like thought, intellect. Shabakulam, that in all of them will be drawn down holiness. What do you mean drawn down holiness? That will feel the amazing goodness of God and the miraculousness of our existence. We'll feel in every aspect of our soul. By means of what? By means of learning the Torah and doing the commandments. Learning the Torah and doing the commandments, this really draws down godliness. It's possible to be spiritual without Torah and the commandments. It's possible to be spiritual, no doubt about it. It says that even the Egyptians were spiritual. They could do all sorts of spiritual tricks. They could turn sticks into snakes. They could turn sticks, into snakes. They could turn water into blood. They were tremendously spiritual people. But that's not holy. Spiritual is just a creation. To draw down the creator into the creation, that's only through the Torah and the commandments. Because the Torah and the commandments, that comes straight from the creator. The Torah and the commandments, that when Jews do it, that draws down godliness. In other words, godliness, another word for godliness is holiness, into these 3 aspects, which is the garments of the soul, that the goal, then the soul will be able to get pleasure from the ray of the Shekhinah, namely to be included in the oneness of God. So we were talking about 2 things. Number 1 is doing the commandments, and number 2 is the temporary reward we get from doing the commandments, which is in heaven. So it's garments for the soul in heaven. But Abraham was not interested at all in going to heaven. It didn't concern him going to heaven. And neither was Isaac, and neither was Jacob. That wasn't their concern. And their concern was revealing truth in the world. So they wanted their soul to be enclosed in truth. The truth can only be achieved by the body, the Jewish body, doing the commandments. And that's the whole secret of the raising of the dead. That the garments of the soul, thought, speech, and action, become pure. Then they become eternal. That's what's called being holy. Masha'enkin, which is not the case if the soul is naked, beli lavush, without any garments. So Eina Yochel is not able to hikalel, to be included in the oneness of God. Me'acha, because shehi bechinas nivra, it just remains a creation. But kol nivra, and every creation, hava v'nifsad, is there here today and gone tomorrow. Rachok me'od, very far away, me'bechinas echad. So that's what it says, that these garments, they become garments for the soul in after death, so that your soul can reveal and can accept a little bit of godliness. They become like sunglasses, whatever the Torah and the commandments. They become sunglasses by means of which you can accept and digest the godliness in the world to come, which is in heaven, when you go to heaven. And like I said before, they make eternal garments for the raising of the dead. That's what the commandments do. But meanwhile, the commandments, there's a good word to it. The good word, they accustom us. That's not the word I want to. They acclimate us to living in God's world. And this world doesn't seem to be God's world. After a person dies, he realizes that the whole business is God's world. The whole business is God's world. But the soul can't accept it unless it has some sort of, had been occupied in some sort of godly things before it left the world. And that's the idea of the Torah and the commandments. The Torah and the commandments, that's like pure truth. And therefore, it has to have these garments, namely thought, speech, and action of the Torah and the commandments. That these are the garments that the soul goes into and surrounded from head to toe, and they draw down this oneness of God into the world. And they're permanent garments because the Torah and the commandments, they're permanent. It might seem to us when we put on tefillin that it's just, takes a couple of minutes. But the fact of the matter is that's out of time. It's something eternal happened. By means of this, the souls can be included in God's oneness. And that's what it means, that the soul of my master was bundled in the bundle of life with God. It's in Shmuel Aleph, the book of Samuel. Hainu, Kamosha Adam, just like a person is bundles up his money in a pouch. Kach also tiya nafsho tzurura, your soul will be bound up in the bundle of life. It'll be wrapped up in the garments of Torah and the commandments to be included in the oneness of God. That's the garments. Okay, what's this got to do with? Okay, ahora meshachas. See how much of this can we get done? I don't know. Let's see what it is. Okay, good. A little bit. What's drawn down? The hara. Okay, so when you do Torah and the commandments, that these garments, and these garments are pure godliness. How can the soul, which is just a creation, how can it be wrapped up in garments, which are part of the Creator? How can it be? And how can it draw down godliness in the world? So it says very simple. It doesn't draw down, only in the raising of the dead will we see really the true holiness of what the commandments did and what the Torah did. Meanwhile, when you do Torah and you do the commandments, the reason you don't feel it now, one of the reasons is because you don't draw down pure 100% godliness, just a little bit, and that's called the reach, smell. Like it says, Verichu b'yirat Hashem. It says by Moshiach that he will smell he will have the fragrance of the fear of God, or he will be able to sense in others. The smell of a thing like a perfume is not the perfume itself. It's just something that comes out from it. It's a fragrance that's emitted. It exudes. What is it? Comes out. Also, this ray, this garment that comes from the Torah and the commandments that we do, is called Erich Anpin. It says this comes from what's called God's great mercy. Arich Api. V'tilati achtem loch. It says that I will put my spirit, my spirit on you. And also it says Erich Ap Anpin means the long nose. Long nose. Api says I will. The word for anger is charon af, but the word also for nose is also af. So when it says that God will lengthen my anger, it means v'tihilati achtem lach. Chotem is also the nose. Like it says in Adra the Nasi, the Baal HaChotem. Who am I praying to? It says I'm praying to the one, the master of the nose. What does that mean? L'bal hachutem ani mitchanen. To the master of the nose, I am praying. How does this go? Well, we know that God has a mouth. God speaks. That's the whole Torah. God has eyes. He looks, sees the world, right? God has ears. He hears our prayers. So, of course, these are not, this is the source of our eyes and our nose and our mouth. God does not, is physical. But God also has a nose. And this nose, if you notice the nose is in the middle of the face, right? The nose is in the middle of the face. So it says the nose is a symbol of God's mercy. And also smell is a very interesting thing. A person can be unconscious and unresponsive to calling his name or even a prick or something like that. It doesn't move, but you give him a strong smelling salts, all of a sudden he comes back. Right? So it says because somehow the smell reaches, it's one of the five senses, but it reaches the essence of the soul. And that's the same thing as with God. The essence, so to speak, of God's connection to us is the smell. So even if everything is gone, the Jewish people are unresponsive totally, but the smell is still there, the essence of the Jewish soul. Sha'orazu, this ray of godliness, which is brought down by means of the Torah and the commandments, is called the nose, smell. This is smell. The God is called Bala Chotem. God is called the master, the owner of the nose. Shu Atzmius Umakar Ha'ora. This is the essence and the source of this ray, which comes from God to the Jewish people, and from the Jewish people to the whole world. That's this garment. This ray is Arucha Me'eretz Midah. It's just a little ray of godliness, but it's greater than all of the worlds. It's much deeper than God's speech. God's speech He creates the world from, right? This God's smell reaches to the essence of God. This is God's connection to the Jewish people. That's why it says the Mashiach will judge things from his smell. And it says he'll also be judged by his smell. It comes from a very high place, namely Ein Sof, which is unlimited, and it comes down below, into a place which is very, very limited. Very, very limited. Okay. Look, and therefore, this is called Erech Anpin. This aspect of God is called long faces, Erech Anpin. But it also means long nose. Aricha da Anpin. Shemarich bebechinas reach. That it's long, they say the smell goes from a very high place to a very low place. Lahalbish neshama. This becomes the garments of the soul in thought, speech, and action of the commandments and the Torah. So the Torah, when it's done, this smell of God, this fragrance, envelops the soul. Okay, and this is going to go back to Jericho. Jericho means smelling. Jericho reach, huh? These garments, these are drawn down by the means of yomim, days. Sheyesh, that there are 365 days in the year. This corresponds to 635 hamshachas. This corresponds, it says that in every human, there are 200 male, there are 248 limbs. And like I said before, I don't know exactly what these limbs are. And there's 360, the heart and the brain and the eyes. And then there's 365, there's 613 commandments. 248 of them are positive commandments. That's the limbs, that's like the commandments. But then there's 365 negative commandments, and that corresponds to the blood vessels. They're called gidim. And that draws down godliness into the world. That corresponds to the days of the year. Kamola mushal, just like the 365 blood vessels, that the blood and life goes through them from the heart to all of the limbs, it's drawn through the blood vessels. That these are what's called gvuros. They're very, very strict. They're very, very limited. And what flows through them is blood, which is red and hot. A person has to have this gvura. This gives us the power. We're talking about now, that's physical, but also spiritual, to control yourself. to force yourself to do good, to force yourself to refrain from bad. And this gives us the power. That's the 365, corresponding to the 365 blood vessels. Blood is what gives us the power to serve God, to stand against our own nature in thought, speech, and in action. Okay, so this, one second, here we go. Yes. 1 minute. Oh, in general, that there are in people, a person should put in his thought to think about God. 1 minute, here we go. Ready? Let's go. Go a little bit over here. One minute. Here we go. That your thoughts should be holy. Your thought should be holy, and that then makes a garment in your thought to God. What should you think about? Lo tei kavanato almanat lekabel pras. You should not think about anything you're going to receive, not this world, not the upper world, but just to be unified in the oneness of God. And that should be your thought, never to be separated from the oneness of God. You should think also about this constantly. We're going to talk about this, God willing, tomorrow. Let's go up to the period. You should also think of the bad thoughts that you have in your garments, that you have in yourself. When you think bad thoughts, these make impure garments for your soul. And not like the fools think that no big deal to think bad thoughts because you're not really doing anything. That's a foolish thing to do. It's very hard to control your thoughts. So it says in the Tanya that a Benoni, in other words, the ideal Jew that isn't the tzaddik, that's not naturally loving God, the ideal average Jew gets bad thoughts. So how is he ideal? How is this ideal? Because he doesn't accept them. If he would be a tzaddik, he would only think about God. He would only feel God. Unlike a businessman, when he's counting his money, he doesn't have any strange thoughts. He doesn't think about anything else. He just thinks about counting the money. The thing that tzaddik, when he's with God, he feels God is creating him. He feels God all the time. So he doesn't have any strange thoughts. But us, a Benoni, which is a normal Jew, he's not thinking about God, doesn't feel God. Once in a while, when he prays, he feels God. So what does he have? He has stupid thoughts pop into his mind. He says, that's natural. Don't worry about it. God is sending you those thoughts. That's not you. And he's sending you those thoughts so that you will ignore them. It's not you. The bad thoughts don't reflect on who you are. Bad thoughts don't. But if you accept the thoughts, that shows who you are. That shows who you are. Just like if you're walking down the streets and you see bad things, right? That doesn't, they're in the street. Just because you saw them, that doesn't, but if you accept those things and if you think about them purposely all the time, then the same thing is, thoughts are tremendously important. Try to direct your thoughts to positive things. That makes God holy in this world. And that's what we're going to talk about more, God willing, tomorrow. What's going on here? Why can't I stop the record? Oh, here it is.